is available, and the book is Intelligence, the Great Line. So Mr. Roy Anderson will give a 20-minute introduction to the art of sensitivity and awareness. This short talk will briefly discuss how the brain of a student struggles to learn when their mind is disturbed by simple insecurities. This is a major reason for all students to miss or misunderstand parts of a lesson, and so largely explains the variation of understanding the teacher witness in any class. This phenomenon is largely unknown to educationalists, yet it is the major reason for students struggling to learn. If we believe something like what is said here, to open the mind of a child, you must first open their heart, which is quoted by Ms. Anderson. You will have an interesting talk ahead. In the next 20 minutes will be definitely fruitful to us. Over to our guest speaker, Mr. Roy Anderson. Roy Anderson.
Okay, salam alaikum. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome everybody. I'm sorry for the technical problem. It's a bit difficult not getting any feedback, but I'll begin to talk. I want to explain to you that when we try to help students, we tend to think of how they think and how their brain works and how clever they are. My experiences and research have taught me that it's got nothing to do with the brain. It's about the mind. And we need to understand how the mind of our students work if we are to help them in their education. I want to begin by giving you a small story. I was teacher training in Nepal many years ago, and I was giving an illustration on a board of a mind map to a group of teachers. And the mind map began with a central nucleus with various lines going off it. And I asked the teachers to give me a name for each of these lines relating to mathematics. One teacher shouted, algebra, and I wrote algebra. Another teacher shouted, trigonometry, and I wrote that down. And the maths teacher, he shouted geometry. Now, for one moment, my mind thought it's geometry, but the maths teacher who knows more than me said geometry. And I lost confidence in my ability to spell the word geometry. And I thought, everybody's looking at me. Is it J or is it G? And the more I thought about everybody's looking at me, the more I lost confidence in my ability to spell geometry with a G. And my mind froze, and I just could not spell that word. Now, I'll explain to you in a moment what happened to my brain, because it's important that you know that. But if we talk about helping our students to learn, we tend to think that we're evaluating their intelligence. We know that the same students get more or less the same marks week after week, year after year. And we assume that their ability is, well, we give them information, they respond, and we mark and we evaluate. And that therefore we tend to think that their ability is related to their intelligence and the effort that they put into it. Now, I'm going to explain to you this is not correct. This is not true. And I want to tell you that education does not work on intelligence. It works on language. Now, in general education, for example, the school and the higher education, education works on two languages. These are mathematics and the language used in the country, for example, English, French, Arabic, Russian, Chinese, whatever it happens to be. And these languages work on rules. Now, if the student is able to keep up with each rule as they're introduced to it and they practice it and they become proficient with it, well, they become very proficient in the language, so they can explain themselves. Now, these rules work on strategies. And the information, the facts that we give them, that we ask them to remember, they're also decided by rules and strategies. So if we go now to how the mind of the student works, how the mind of the individual works, you and I also, our mind asks two questions. Am I safe? And what is the most interesting for me? Now, if we keep in our mind these two questions that the mind of each student is constantly asking themselves, then we can find ways to help them to learn better. To the student, am I safe? It means, am I safe at home? Are my parents happy? Do I feel secure at home? Or are my parents fighting? Have they got divorced? And if I feel I am not safe at home, then my mind is trying to deal with that factor of insecurity. So I'm not able to focus on the teacher giving me the rule, whatever the rule happens to be. Equally, and we must remember that in the classroom, it's a very competitive atmosphere. Every student really wants to be the best student, and some students hurt other students on purpose so that they can pull down their self-esteem so that they can get a better mark. And therefore, in the class, the student is asking themselves, am I safe? Is anybody going to hurt my identity? Are they laughing at me because of the shape of my nose, because I wear glasses, or because my hair is a different color, or something like that? And thirdly, the student asks, am I safe with the teacher or with the lecturer? Unfortunately, lecturers or teachers are human beings. Some are very, very good, some are so-so, some are very terrible. But the mind of the student is constantly asking themselves, am I safe at home? Am I safe in the classroom? Am I safe with the teacher? And if they feel they are safe, then they can focus on the rule as it is to be learned. Now, the second question the mind is asking is, what is the most interesting for me? If the information in the lesson, or if the teacher is not giving the information in the right way for that student, so this is not the most interesting thing for me. Therefore, my mind drifts onto a game I played, whether this girl likes me or whether this boy likes me, whatever it happens to be, and the mind drifts. And when the mind drifts, they lose the rule. So it's very important for the teacher to be sensitive to the emotional needs of every single student in the class. Now, I've spent many, many decades finding out ways to be sensitive to every single student in the class and to be able to orchestrate their minds into the mindset that I'm trying to teach them. And I've developed a teacher training course that enables teachers to do this. But let's just go back a little bit to this factor of, am I safe? Because this is very important. What I want to talk to you now is about how the brain of the individual works. We have what we call a parasympathetic system. The parasympathetic nervous system enables us to deal with the factors in our life. We walk, we think, we do this, and everything else like that. But if some danger comes to us, if we sense there is a danger, physical or emotional, to our identity, then we begin to change our process and we release certain chemicals. And one of these chemicals is called cortisol. Now, cortisol is something very few teachers know about, but it's very, very important that you do. You see, what happens, let me give you an example. Imagine that you're walking in nature, and it's a nice day, and you feel very comfortable and very happy. It's a blue sky and green trees, and you notice a small flower, and you think this is a very beautiful flower, and you look down to examine the flower. You notice the color is red, and it has shape of petals. This is a learning experience. You're really enjoying the learning experience. Then suddenly you hear a noise and you see a snake. the moment you recognize the snake, you have a sense of fear. And when you have a sense of fear, your brain overproduces this chemical cortisol. Cortisol then floods the frontal cortex of the brain, and it blocks the synaptic gap so that you're not able to process information accurately. In fact, you might not be able to process information at all. You no longer look at the flower. You can't see it. You're looking at the flower, but you can't see it because your mind is telling you there is a danger, deal with the danger. And this is what cortisol does. And this is what happened to me when I was teaching this mind map to this group of teachers. When the maths teacher said geometry, I thought, he's the maths teacher, he knows more than me. Is it geometry or is it geometry? And I lost confidence in my own ability because there was a lot of people looking at me and I didn't want to make a mistake on the board. When that fear came, cortisol flooded the synaptic gaps, and I was not able to relay information from in the neurons in my brain, and I just couldn't think. And this is very important that you understand this, because I remember one teacher shouting at a girl in her class and said, "You are so stupid, you can't be in my class." Now, when the teacher humiliated the child in this way, the child couldn't think because cortisol had flooded into the brain and it is completely blocked. The child wasn't able to think. I'll give you another example. This again, when I was in Nepal, I was watching a teacher, and the teacher was shouting information to the students and telling them what they were to learn. And all the students were saying, "Yes, sir, yes, sir," because they were frightened to raise a question. But one boy was lost. He got distracted, and for him, this was not the most interesting information. And he started to look out the window. Now, when the teacher saw this boy looking out at the window, the teacher said, "Boy, stand up. What did I just say?" Well, the problem was the boy's mind went blank because cortisol overproduced because he felt threatened, and therefore he wasn't able to rationalize on the information. The teacher began shouting at him, "What did I say?" The more humiliated and more embarrassed the boy became, the more cortisol was pumping into his brain, the less he was able to understand what was happening. Now, cortisol works at different levels with different human beings according to the experiences we have. If, for example, you go to a student who might be having some problem and you want to help that student, if that student feels that your presence embarrasses them, cortisol can be produced. And if cortisol is triggered off, it'll block their ability to understand what you're saying. So I'm just talking to you now about to be aware of this factor of cortisol. It can trigger off in a student when they feel a sense of danger or a sense of threat. And we need to understand how to give love and security to each student so that we keep this emotional level down. When I teach, I always try to make it fun and happy because I know that some students will have problems at home or in the class. And if I can keep the class happy and laughing and enjoying what I'm teaching about, then I know the cortisol level is down and they're able to relate to what I'm talking about. I don't know if anybody can hear me. Can you give me some kind of response about what I've said, please? Type it. Is anybody there? I can see that. Okay. All these, I get indications. All these mics are muted. I can't unmute them. Okay. So just to recap, what I've said to you is that learning in school or academic learning has got nothing to do with intelligence. It is about the student understanding a rule, practicing the rule, becoming competent with the rule, and keeping up with each rule as the lessons progress. Now, education has a purpose to weed out students. It wants to find out those who are able to keep up. because these are the students who will be selected for responsible jobs in society. And so education gives a lot of useless information to try to find out which students can keep up with it. A strong report with the students does wonders. Yes, it's quite true. And so I lost my track of thought there. So what I always, when I teach, I always try to begin a lesson with a friendly introduction. I often tell them a story that's related to what we're talking about, because we all love stories, and stories enable us to link into a subject matter. And then, of course, feedback is very important. Now, you'll find out that we want our students to show us how clever they are by demonstrating the information that they've learned. But there are strategies that you can teach your students how to remember information, mnemonic strategies, mind maps, and things like that. So, and a lot of it's to do with confidence. So try to get your students to have confidence to talk among themselves in groups, and help and make sure that some students don't dominate a group because they have more confidence. Always look for the student who's shy or who's struggling, and get their friends to help them to have the confidence to make a mistake and learn by the mistake. I really don't know if anybody's able to hear me, because it's completely blank for me, so it's a bit difficult talking into an empty room. Can you type something, give me some feedback, please? It is not a matter of IQ, but rather the feeling atmospheric class which is connected to the brain function. Mobina, yes, it's quite true what you're saying, but remember, the brain is modulated by the mind. It is the mind that controls the brain. You know, there was you may have heard of the Mozart effect, I think in 1993 or something like that. Somebody in Berkeley, I think Berkeley, California, found out that if you listen to Mozart, your brain becomes much better at spatial temporal reasoning, being able to do mathematics or play chess. What they found out was that when you listen to Mozart, the brain cells actually change in their configuration. And that change in their configuration enables the individual to be better at spatial temporal reasoning, mathematics, logical thinking, that type of thing. So we have to understand that the brain is not fixed. The brain is always moving, or the brain cells are always moving, controlled by the mind. And if the emotion of the student is happy, believe in themselves, then these brain cells can interrelate. But the moment the student feels nervous or tense or frightened, so cortisol comes up and it blocks the synaptic gap between the neurons, which is, as I explained, has a purpose for our survival. Would anybody like to type a question, please? Yes, the mind controls the brain. Yes, it does. Psychology over physiology. Even the best student can shut himself up or herself down if he or she is not happy in the learning environment. So what you have said so far, yes, this Zumrat, yes, this is quite true. It's very, very true. I'll give you a tip. Of course, it depends on the age of your students, but very often, you know, when the students come into the classroom, their mind's on many, many different things. If we're dealing with 20-year-olds, the mind's on relationships. You know, this girl likes me, this boy likes me, or even what kind of game I played. And our problem is to get all these disorganized minds to calm down and focus into our mind. And I learned a tip when I was in India, so that sometimes I begin a lesson by meditation. I get all the students to sit down, I play some calming music, and I just get them to calm down and just relax. Feel a sense of security and peace, just listening to calm music. And then I begin the lesson. So it's a question of getting all the minds cool or crazy to calm down and relax so they can listen to your mind. Just to recap again, to help our students, we must remember that the mind of every single student is asking itself two questions. Number one, am I safe? And number two, what is the most interesting for me? So you have to make sure that the student feels safe in your presence, protected by you, so that other students are not laughing at them, not ridiculing them or whatever. And I've had a lot of experiences where students have been traumatized by other students. We can talk about that another time. And then you have to make sure that information you give to them, you present it in such a way that it is the most interesting for them, and the mind is not drifting off to other things. Yes, this is correct. Yes. Safety. Safety. Am I safe? If I feel I'm safe, then I can be happy. Yes. By the way, if again, I don't know if you can hear me, but just 1 moment. I just want to tell you that if you're interested in what I'm saying, I've written 8 books on how the brain works and how education works. And my first book is called The Illusion of Education. And all these are available on Amazon. This is hardback and you can get it in paperback. The Illusion of Education. This explains why we do not teach children how to reason and why we do not teach them how to think and why we simply process them on the language skills that they've developed through their home, their domestic circumstances. It's a political policy. And then, well, I've written a book called The Hidden Secrets of Intelligence. I just rewritten that book called Intelligence, the Great Lie. And I will release this on Kindle very shortly over the next couple of weeks. And Faisal can give you information if you're interested. Intelligence, the Great Lie, explains that the whole idea of intelligence is a political ploy to get people to follow a nationalistic theme and to get them to work in the society according to the domestic ways of thinking that their family have. It is a way of maintaining a status quo in society. In other words, intelligence really doesn't exist. And I've explained that in that book. The Brain Environmental Complex is a book that explains how the brain really works. And I gave you a small insight into that with cortisol. And then a book called Mediation, which explains how you can be sensitive to a teacher, from a teacher to a student, and from the parent to a child, to help them to feel calm, to help them to feel a sense of security, and from that, help them to learn. I have met many students who don't believe that they could do this. I can't do this task. I can't do it. But if you get them to calm down and relax, and you can find out what they don't understand, if you can help them to better understand what they didn't understand, then they get a sense of self-belief. And then in a self-perpetuating mood, then they can learn by themselves. Lots of experiences of that. Anybody can learn anything. I've had numerous situations where I've taken the worst of the class and made them equal to the best in a very short time with just love and security. And if you're able to agree with what I've been saying so far, then you will realize that we are simply processing students on the language skills that they've developed from home, the confidence that they've developed, and their ability to control the distractions in their life. We are processing them. We are looking for those who will be the leaders and those who will be the workers in society. So, but we need a different kind of education. And so I've written this book, Preparing a New World Education. There are other books, and if you're interested, I've just written a very romantic and very adventurous book called The Woman. This is available on Amazon too. This is the best book I've ever written, actually. Would you like to ask me any questions, please? Thank you, Heba. Thank you. Thank you, Mabina. Thank you. You know, I used to teach English in Japan. I taught in one of the best medical universities in Japan for 9 years. And we all find when we're teaching language that some students are far better than others. And we tend to think that they are cleverer because they're better, but it's not true. It's just a question of experience. And if you start teaching English to small children, you'll find that the children who speak English at home or have been to a different country will have more competence than a student who doesn't have that experience. So always remember, it's only about development. And our job is to help every single student believe in their ability and to get that security and to help them to understand the rules that they didn't do earlier. I can talk for a long time about this. I had a very poor education when I was a child in school. And I didn't learn the rules of grammar. And I struggled for many, many, many years. I'm still struggling now because I never learned the rules at school. Zimrit, thank you. Okay. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. Does anybody have a question, please? Oh, Lubna writes a question. Somebody once said to her that my brother is right-handed, so he is more intelligent. It's not correct. It's not correct. You can be left-handed or right-handed. It doesn't make any difference at all. Intelligence is about the mind, not about how you hold something with your muscles. It's about the mind, that's all. Nothing to do with the dexterity of your fingers. It's just the mind. Or Herber. What does Herber ask me? Wait a minute. Herber asked me a question. Herber. I would like to know if you have come across a situation where you've dealt with a student suffering through cortisol pumping in his mind, and how did you deal? Yeah, yes, very frequently. In actual fact, every time you go into your class, there will be some students who have cortisol in overproducing. I mean, it can be very serious, or it can be just a little bit, and that little bit will be causing them to block their ability to concentrate. And if you're trying, you'll notice this. If you're trying to talk to a student and explain something to them, and you know that they're not listening to you, even though they're looking at you, trying to give you the impression that they're listening to you, it's because cortisol is there. So stop teaching them. Stop teaching them and distract them by some other thought. ask them what they like, ask them if they went on a holiday, or if who's your boyfriend, who's your girlfriend, whatever it is like that. So you get the cortisol down, and once they are relaxed, the cortisol will come down, and then they're able to listen to the information you're giving them and then connect with what they already know. Remember that our ability to process information is decided through 3 phases. Number 1, how we interrogate information, how much detail we examine, and then how we relate that to our past experiences, and then how we can use the current information to our past experiences to explain our mind, which is all language. Does anybody have another question, please? Heber writes to me and she says, I would like to know if you have come across a situation where you have dealt with a student suffering through cortisol pumping in his mind, and how did you deal, or in general, what do you suggest? I come across this all the time, but sometimes it's a very high level of overproduction. Other times it's a very low level, but it's the cortisol can come up and go down, come up and go down, can come up and go down. When you feel it's coming up, then you've got to help them to relax. As I've just explained, take their mind off something else, ask them what they like, make friends with them, laugh with them. And when this cortisol comes down, then their brain can relate to what you're explaining to them. Well, it is okay. I think that's enough for today. I'm hoping to come to Oman with my wife, who's a great English teacher, and she may hopefully be joining our university, so then we'll all have a chance to actually meet. Faisal is a very old and dear friend of mine. And if you want information about the books that I've written, ask Faisal, and he can give you more information. And I wish you all safety and happiness, and good luck. Good luck with your job and your help and the way that you're helping your students. Thank you so much. Thank you. Goodbye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson, Roy Anderson. It's indeed what we believe is what is
Thank you.
Something that we heard today. We share what you believe and what you actually write in the books, and so you can see a lot of thank yous.
Goodbye.
Thanks.
Goodbye
from all of us. Yeah,
I hope
thank
to
you
see
so
you
much.
in
Thank
Oman
you.
with my wife, Irina.
Hope to see you. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Goodbye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay. Yeah. Bye. So, dear